Hey everyone! For today's One Piece TCG video, we're going to be talking about the Blue Leader Crocodile and how you can build yourself a Baroque Works deck. Much like Baroque Works in the source material, its tabletop counterpart handles quite the same. You want to play cards from your hand to control your opponent's side of the field, all while strategically building up your side from the shadows, until that decisive moment when you're ready to strike and end the game. Let's sneak into this organization and find out what cards they use in order to take down their opponents and win the game. First, we need to talk about their leader, Crocodile. A blue leader with 5,000 power and 5 life, their activate main ability is return 4 Dawn and bounce a character with 4 cost or lower to your opponent's hand. This is a great card as you can use Rested Dawn in order to activate the ability. First, we need to talk about the staple cards in this deck. Number 1 is Baroque Works, a 1-cost card that allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, revealing a Baroque Works card among them, and placing it into your hand. This allows you to search for those much needed cards that you're missing from your hand in order to set up early game combos as well as late game huge heavy hitters. Next card on our list is Officer Agent. This is a 2-cost counter which allows you to play a 3-cost or lower Baroque Works character card during your opponent's turn, only during the counter phase. This allows you to cheat a character card during your opponent's turn, which I will show you later on in this video. Next card on our list is the 7-cost character Crocodile. With 7,000 power and a 1,000 counter, he also has 2 abilities, which makes him very powerful. He has Banish, which allows you when you deal damage to your opponent's leader, instead of taking that card and putting it into their hand, the life card goes directly into the trash. He also has when you attach 1 Dawn, all blue event cards cost 1 less to play from your hand. This makes him extremely powerful in the late game as you're able to play your counter cards against heavy hitting opponents for 1 less, while also allowing you to get stronger characters out in the field or play even more counter cards from your hand, which this deck revolves heavily around. This means you can get more than 1 Crocodile out onto the field and get your counter cards out for much less. Not only does he have 2 strong abilities, he also has a counter, as well as he's a late game heavy hitter. This makes him a very strong character to have in this deck and a must-have if you're wanting to play a Baroque Works style deck. As a side note, it is great to have Crocodile in your opening hand for 2 reasons. 1, he has a counter on him which allows you to use him for the early game in the event that you do not have any counters available. And number 2, you have him for the late game and you don't need to worry about searching for him during the early to mid game when you do want to play him during the late game stages. Next on our list is the most important card in this deck, and that is Mr. 1. Mr. 1 is a 2-cost 3,000 with 1 Dawn attached. He gets plus 1,000 for every 2 event cards in your trash. Not only that, he does have a plus 1,000 counter. With this deck relying heavily on event cards, you're going to want to be playing them constantly. Once you get Mr. 2 out on the field during the mid game, you should be at least 6,000 power with the 1 Dawn attached. This, however, does not make this card invulnerable, as it is a 2-cost with 3,000, which means he can be easily KO'd or returned to the hand with other cards. The next staple character is Mr. 3, a 2-cost with 3,000 power and a 1,000 counter. On play, one of your opponent's 4-cost or lower characters cannot attack until the end of their next turn. This is a great card to play with Officer Agent or even on your turn, as it locks your opponent's side of the board for the early to mid game and allows you to set up your side of the board for future attacks. The next character we're going to look at, and the final staple card, is Mr. 2, a 3-cost character with 4,000 power, a 2,000 counter, and when you attach 1 Dawn and attack your opponent, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and choose a Baroque Works type event card and place it into your hand. The importance of this card is it's most likely the only 2,000 counter you'll be running in your deck, as well as when you're searching for event cards, you're probably going to be running a majority of event cards that are Baroque Works only, and very little that are outside of the Baroque Works cards like Love Love Beam. While it is not bad to run other cards that are not Baroque Works, you want to run more so that way you do get this ability to search. Next, let's take a look at some support cards. The first one being Miss All Sunday. With 3 cost, 1,000 power, and 1,000 counter, this blocker is very strong. On KO, you can grab 1 event card from your trash and place it into your hand. Now, the reason why I do not consider this a staple card in this deck is because, yes, you can grab cards from your trash and place them into your hand, but with how many event cards you are running, it's most likely that you'll be running into multiple copies into your hand. You can sub this card out, however, for another blocker that I believe is just as strong and a great alternative to this card, especially if you're playing against aggressive opponents. And that card is Boa Hancock. Boa Hancock is a 3-cost, 1000 character with a 1000 counter and is blocker as well. The only difference is it has trigger, and when the trigger is activated, you get to play this card. It is not a definitive alternative, but with the state of the game and no sideboards at this time, it could be something you'd want to consider, especially if you know your opponents are going to be playing decks like Red Zoro, where you're going to be facing aggressive opponents. Next up is Desert Spada. Desert Spada is a 1-cost counter card that gives one of your characters or leaders plus 2000. Not only that, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, rearrange them in any order, and put them on the top or the bottom. It also has a trigger effect that allows you to draw 2 cards and trash one of them from your hand. I like this card over Perona in this deck because not only is it an event card, but it also buffs up Mr. 1 as well. This does not mean adding Perona wouldn't be a bad thing, but I believe this is a good alternative. Next up is the 9-cost Dracule Mihawk. With 9000 power and an on-play ability that allows you to return a 7-cost or lower character to the bottom of your opponent's deck, this is a heavy hitter that would be a great addition to your deck, especially if you're not playing many characters. Next up is Love Love Beam, a 2-cost counter that gives one of your characters plus 4000, and if you have 3 cards or lower in your hand, you get to draw 1 card. This is great especially if you're playing a lot of event cards and you're going to want that draw power so that way you get more cards in your hand and you're able to answer your opponent's cards. The final card I want to talk about, and one of my favorites, is Overheat. A 2-cost counter where you give one of your characters or leaders plus 4000 and you get to bounce a 3-cost or lower character to your opponent's hand. It also has a trigger where you get to bounce a 4-cost or lower character to your opponent's hand as well. Now, we've seen some staple support characters, but let's see how many I like to run. You're going to want to run 4 Baroque works in your deck. The reason is, with a lot of characters and event cards having the keyword Baroque works, this card allows you to search for them. So this is a must. This card, as well as a few others, eliminates the need for having Perona and allows us to put more support or staple cards in so that way we can complement the Baroque Works type cards. Next up is Desert Spada. This is another one of those cards that complements the draw power and search ability to make sure that we can get the proper cards we need in our deck. The next card we're going to want to run a full playset of is Officer Agents. This card can be played aggressively or defensively. It is a great card to have and allows you to play to your playstyle depending on how the match is going and how you like to play personally. With that being said, you need to assess the state of the game and how much Dawn you have open because it is not necessarily the best card to play at that point in time. You need to make sure you have the proper cards in hand as well as the proper state of the board in order to play certain cards with it. For example, if your opponent has strong cards out on the field, it might be a better time to play Mr. 3. Next up, let's look at some staple characters. I run a full playset of Mr. 1 for 2 reasons. Number 1, you can deal a lot of damage surprisingly after you've played a bunch of event cards, and number 2, because he's a 2-cost and 3000, our opponent can easily take him out. The next card that I play in this deck is Mr. 3. I run this card at 4 as well. The reason for that is it controls your opponent's side of the board, but is also a 2-cost with 3000, making it very easy to bump up to a 5000 cost character and deal damage to your opponent's leader or other characters on the side of the board. The next card we're going to want to run at a full playset is Miss All Sunday. The reason for that is it's the only blocker in our deck, and it allows you to get those cards from the trash if you need it, allowing you to play more counters or more search cards if you have to. Next card we're going to be playing is everyone's favorite, Mr. 2. We're going to want to run a full playset. We don't necessarily want to play this card because we might get the cards we need, and with Miss All Sunday, we could grab the cards we need from the trash. This card is very situational, but with a 2000 counter, we want it at 4. Next, let's talk about our heavy hitter. That's Crocodile. We're going to want to run this card at 3. The reason is, you're most likely only going to be able to get 2 out on the board, and you're going to be lucky if you even get a 3rd. So, we just want to run it at 3. The next card I play is a 2 of Mihawk. The reason why I only run 2 is because he's very situational. He's good to get rid of some of your opponent's high power characters, but he's also there to deal some heavy damage if need be. The next card I like to run 1 of, at least in my blue or blue-purple decks, and that's Arlong. Because you're able to take one of your opponent's life and put it on the bottom of your opponent's deck, it's very strong, especially if you're playing against another Baroque Works deck. Now, this card you have to be strategic with, so that's why I only run 1, and it's not a game winner, it's just very, very situational. Next, I run 4 Love beams. The reason for this is it's a very powerful counter with 4,000, and it allows you to get that draw power if you find you're running out of card. I also run 4 copies of Overheat as well. This card here is great to have because it's also an additional support, but also gets cards off the field. The reason why I'm a little hesitant about this is because if your opponent's playing a lot of on-play abilities, it's not necessarily good. And that's why I also include Thrust Pad Cannon here, as well as 4 copies of Sables. These cards could be interchangeable, it just depends on if you're playing against an opponent who has on-play abilities. You don't want to play those against them. At this point, you might be confused, or you might be thinking, hey, how do I get these abilities off? When's a good time to play this? Well, now's the time when I'm going to show you. So let's assume a couple of things. Number 1, we have a couple of Dawn open, and our opponent has 2 characters ready to go to attack us. We're going to assume that they're at 5,000, and we have no characters on the field at this point in time. Our opponent attacks our leader for 5,000. At this point in time, what we are going to do is we're going to activate Officer Agents. Because our opponent already attacked us with 1 character, we're going to play Mr. 3, and then targeting Jack, meaning they cannot attack with them, and they have wasted 1 Dawn on their character. This means they cannot play any other cards with that Dawn attached to Jack. Unless they use a Return Dawn ability, there's no way they could use that Dawn. Alternatively, we could have played a Miss All Sunday with Officer Agents. Then, our opponent might have attacked with Jack towards our leader with 5,000 again, and we could have had some Dawn left open, for argument's purposes. At this point in time, what we're going to do is we're going to block with Miss All Sunday. Once we block with Miss All Sunday, we're going to take back into our hand the Officer Agent. If there is a better target than Officer Agents at this point in time, assess the situation and make that decision. At this point in time, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to see if your opponent has any valid targets for attack. They may still have their leader, or they could have another character ready to attack your life directly. So what we're going to do at this point is say they declare another attack. At this point in time, what you can do is rest that 2 Dawn, you can make a decision. Maybe they don't have any other attacks available, or they might not be a threat this turn, or no Dawn available. Then what we can do, because we can sense no threat, we can play Mr. 1. Because there's going to be no targets that can attack him or target him this turn, we know that we can use Mr. 1 during our attack phase, and then we have some event cards in our trash. Let's take a look at one last scenario. Let's assume that we have character Crocodile ready to go or unit on the field. Why is this character so important? Well, not only is he strong, has a counter, and has banish, but his effect is pretty powerful as well. Let's just assume we have 1 Dawn attached on 1 character right off the bat, or even 2 for that matter. You can play event cards for basically nothing. Let's take a look at what we can play. For starters, you have a ton of 1-cost event cards in your deck already. Because we can activate these effects during our opponent's turn, we can now play counter cards such as Desert Spada or Officer Agents for nothing, and get cards such as Mr. 2 or Mr. 3 or even Mr. 1 out on the opponent's field for 0 cost during the counter phase. There's many other cards that we can get out for 1 less or even free during our opponent's turn. This means even if we have a card, like for example Sables, that is a 4-cost card, we can play it for 2 during our turn. Alright everyone, that's it for today's deck tech on Blue Crocodile Baroque Works. If there was any changes you would make, leave them down in the comments below, or if you like these types of videos, please leave a comment on which deck you'd like to see. I'm going to be making another one on my personal favorite, one that I've been running, or if you'd like to see any other videos, please leave a like and a comment, and yeah, thanks again for watching.